The sun hung over Aitoro like a fiery judgment, pressing its heat upon the cracked red earth until even the lizards hid beneath fallen palm fronds. Dust rose with every breath of wind, curling through the open windows of the Temple of Divine Mercy, a small church built from patched planks and prayers. Inside, Pastor Chukwudinoji moved slowly from bench to bench, his threadbare shirt soaked with sweat, his hands calloused from scrubbing wood instead of holding blessings. Welcome to Real Life African Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss any of our tales. The benches were few, 6 in all, and even they groaned as if tired of waiting for worshippers who no longer came. He paused by the pulpit, staring at the crooked cross above it. Once, it had been bright and new, a promise of revival. Now, its paint had peeled into flakes, and a spider had spun its web from one end of the beam to the other. It looked almost symbolic, like fate caught between heaven and dust. Chukwudi sighed. He could still remember when he first built the church with his own hands, when the villagers came with excitement, when children ran barefoot around the altar, and the drums of praise shook the evening air. But years had rolled by like restless waves, and hope had thinned with them. The people wanted miracles now, not sermons. They wanted fire from heaven, not patience. His wife, Ngozi, stood by the doorway watching him. Her wrapper was faded, her eyes kind but weary, her smile stretched thin from too many words of encouragement. Chukwudi, she said softly, leave it for now. The benches will still be here tomorrow. He turned, forcing a smile. If I leave them, who will clean them? The angels. She chuckled weakly, but her silence afterward said more than laughter could. Behind her words, he heard the rumbling of their empty pots, the long sigh of hunger that had become part of their prayers. In the corner of the small parsonage, a sack of gari sat half empty, the oil had run out 2 days ago. That night, as they ate their last handful of roasted corn, Ngozi prayed over it as though it were a feast. Father, she whispered, thank you for provision, even when it is small. Chukwudi echoed her amen, but his heart was elsewhere, lost in the question that gnawed at him every night, what have I done wrong, Lord? He had fasted, prayed, labored. Yet his church stood like a forgotten seed in dry soil. Meanwhile, across the radio, other preachers announced crusades, healing wonders, and overflowing miracles. Their laughter echoed in his ears long after the broadcast ended. The next afternoon, the air in the Aitoro market was thick with dust and noise. Traders shouted over each other, the smell of fried bean cakes mixed with the sharp scent of palm wine. Chukwudi moved through the crowd, clutching the last 200 naira in his pocket. He planned to buy tomatoes and a little pepper, enough to give their meal a taste of dignity. It was then that he heard a familiar name ripple through the crowd, Pastor Jethro Obina. The man himself stood by a sleek black SUV, surrounded by admirers. His white suit shone even under the dusty sky, and his wrist glimmered with gold. Posters bearing his face were plastered on a nearby wall, Fire Encounter Crusade, Miracles Without Measure. Chukwudi froze where he stood, both awed and uneasy. Pastor Jethro was everything he had once dreamed of becoming, respected, powerful, chosen. Their eyes met by accident. Jethro smiled, walked over, and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. My brother in the vineyard, he said, his voice rich with confidence. I know that face anywhere. You serve in Aitoro, yes. Chukwudi nodded, humbled and flustered. Yes, sir. Temple of Divine Mercy. Jethro laughed lightly. Oh, mercy indeed. The Lord loves humble beginnings. Come, sit with me. Have you eaten? Before he could refuse, Jethro ordered food from a nearby vendor, rice and stew, thick with meat. Chukwudi hesitated at first, but hunger overcame pride. He ate in silence, while Jethro watched him with calm interest. You remind me of myself many years ago, Jethro said. A small church, few members, endless prayers. I used to ask God if he could even see me. Chukwudi looked up sharply, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "What changed, sir?" Jethro leaned back, his smile faint but knowing. "Recognition. There are levels of grace, my brother. Some only come when heaven finally recognizes your sacrifice. There is a gift that opened my eyes to this truth. It changed my ministry forever." Chukwudi felt something stir inside him, a mixture of curiosity and longing. "What kind of gift?" Jethro's eyes glinted, the sunlight catching them like glass. "One that cannot be spoken of lightly. When the time is right, you will understand. Come to Lagos. Spend a week with me. Let me show you what true favor looks like." The words sank deep, heavy as oil in water. Chukwudi wanted to ask more, but Jethro's phone rang, ending the moment. He smiled again, patted Chukwudi's shoulder, and said, "Sometimes, God remembers his servants in unexpected ways. Don't refuse when he calls." Then he climbed into his SUV and was gone, leaving the smell of engine smoke and perfume behind. That night, back in his small room, Chukwudi lay awake beside Ngozi, listening to the chirp of distant crickets. The ceiling fan spun lazily above them. He stared at the cracked roof, at the stars leaking through the holes. Jethro's words echoed again and again. Recognition. Favor. Unexpected ways. He turned to the window, where the moon glowed faintly over the silent churchyard. Somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered, dangerous, hungry, alive. "What if," he whispered to himself, "this is God's way of remembering me?" And though the night was still, it felt as if something far away had just begun to move. Lagos was nothing like Aitoro. The air itself seemed to hum with ambition and noise, a restless city that never closed its eyes. From the moment Pastor Chukwudi stepped out of the crowded bus at Ojota, the scent of burning fuel and roasted corn filled his lungs. The skyline glimmered in the distance, tall buildings cutting through the haze like proud monuments to men's dreams. Lagos was loud, hungry, and alive, an altar of movement and money. He had come with a single small bag, his Bible, and the hope that had been burning since that day in the market. Pastor Jethro Obino's driver waited by a shining black SUV, the same one from Aitoro, as if to remind him that greatness was waiting. The man opened the door for him with silent efficiency, and within minutes, they were weaving through Lagos traffic toward the Citadel of Fire Ministries International, Jethro's church. When Chukwudi saw it, his breath caught. The building rose from the ground like a modern temple, walls of polished marble, glass doors that gleamed like mirrors, and a massive cross glinting gold against the sunlight. Crowds moved in and out of the compound, men in suits, women in fine lace, cameras mounted everywhere. The sound of drums and electric guitars rolled through the air like thunder. Inside, the sanctuary was vast, filled with the fragrance of perfume and the cold breath of air conditioners. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fire. Ushers in crisp uniforms moved gracefully through the aisles. It was not just a church, it was an empire of faith. Chukwudi sat quietly at the back as the service began. The choir's voices rose like waves, harmonies powerful enough to shake the soul. Then Jethro appeared on the stage, radiant in a white robe trimmed with gold. His presence filled the hall, every head turned toward him as if magnetized. His voice was soft but commanding, the kind that wrapped around hearts and made people believe. "Grace," Jethro said, raising his hand, "is not what you seek, it is what seeks you when heaven recognizes your sacrifice." The congregation erupted in shouts of "Amen" and "Fire." The cameras followed his every movement, screens magnified his face across the room. And from the back, Chukwudi watched with a strange mixture of awe and yearning. Every word, every gesture felt charged with something beyond human, something that shimmered just beneath the surface of faith. After the service ended, an usher led him through a private corridor to Jethro's office. The noise of the crowd faded behind him, replaced by a solemn quiet. Inside, The walls were lined with shelves of leather-bound Bibles, ancient scrolls, and ornaments that glowed faintly under the light. Strange carvings marked the woodwork, symbols he couldn't recognize. The air was thick with the scent of incense and oil. Jethro entered a few minutes later, smiling warmly. He removed his robe, revealing a simple black shirt beneath, and gestured for Chukwudi to sit. "You have seen the grace of God in this house," Jethro said, his tone low, almost intimate. "But what you saw is not for everyone. Some altars are born, others are built. Do you understand?" Chukwudi swallowed, unsure how to answer. He simply nodded. Jethro walked to a side cabinet, unlocked it, and drew out a small wooden box. From it, he lifted something wrapped in deep purple cloth. As he unwrapped it, the light in the room seemed to dim slightly, as if shadows leaned closer to watch. It was a bronze plate, round and heavy, engraved with calling lines and symbols that shimmered when they caught the light. The markings were unfamiliar, almost alive in their movement. Chukwudi felt a chill creep down his spine. "This," Jethro whispered, "is called the plate of recognition. It receives and returns. It is a vessel of favor." He set the plate on the table between them. The surface seemed to hum faintly, vibrating like something breathing. Jethro reached into his pocket, took an envelope filled with cash, and placed it gently on the plate. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then, before Chukwudi's eyes, the envelope shimmered, its edges fading until it was gone. Vanished completely. Chukwudi gasped and stepped back. Jethro smiled, unbothered. "When you serve God with this," he said, "your altar will never run dry." Chukwudi couldn't speak. His heart raced. Every thought of scripture and faith tangled inside his mind. He wanted to ask how, but the words wouldn't come. Jethro seemed to sense the question anyway. "Not all grace is loud, my brother," he said gently. "Some grace requires recognition. Heaven notices the vessel before it notices the voice. Remember that." He covered the plate again and handed it to Chukwudi, the cloth warm to the touch. "Go back to Itoro. Place this on your altar. You will understand soon enough." Chukwudi hesitated, his conscience whispering warnings he couldn't quite form. But the weight of poverty, the emptiness of his church, and the hunger in his wife's eyes pressed against him like invisible hands. He accepted the plate with trembling fingers. That night, back in the small guest room of the church's lodging, he couldn't sleep. He unwrapped the cloth slightly, letting the dim light from the window touch the bronze. The symbols shimmered faintly, pulsing like veins of gold beneath the surface. He touched it once, just to feel the metal. It was cold, then suddenly warm. For a moment, he thought he heard something, a soft hum, like the vibration of distant voices beneath the earth. He dropped the cloth and stepped back, heart pounding. The sound faded immediately, swallowed by the night. In the morning, he boarded a bus back to Itoro. The plate lay in his bag, wrapped tightly in velvet and secrecy. When he arrived home, Ngozi met him at the door, surprised by his sudden joy. He told her it was a special offering plate, a gift for the altar. She smiled faintly and touched the cloth. "It feels strange," she murmured. He laughed nervously. "It's the weight of blessing." But that night, as the oil lamp flickered and the wind whispered through the cracks in their wooden walls, the plate hummed softly in the dark. It was a low, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing. Ngozi turned in her sleep, restless. And in the silence of the small house, Pastor Chukwudi lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if heaven truly remembered him, or if something else had answered first. Sunday dawned in Itoro with the sound of distant cocks and the smell of burning firewood. The air was still, almost too still, as if the village itself waited for something unseen. Inside the small temple of Divine Mercy, Pastor Chukwudi Noji stood before the altar, the mysterious bronze plate placed carefully atop a white cloth. The morning light slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls and kissed the metal surface, making it glimmer faintly like something alive. The congregation was small, as always: 5 widows, 2 traders, a young mother with her sleeping child, and a few children too restless to sit still. Ngozi moved quietly among them, leading the chorus softly, her voice tame but sweet. Chukwudi's heart pounded as he stepped to the pulpit. He preached about divine remembrance, his words carrying a new weight, a strange fire that made even his own ears tremble. When the offering time came, he hesitated only for a moment. He lifted the plate carefully, as though handling something sacred and dangerous, and placed it at the front of the church. The members walked forward one by one, dropping in crumpled notes, small coins, and a few envelopes of tithe. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the silent church like whispers. When the last person gave, Chukwudi bowed his head. "Father," he murmured, "accept their offering. Let your name be glorified." Nothing unusual happened, no flash of light, no thunder from heaven. The service ended quietly, and people left with tired smiles. Yet as they stepped into the afternoon sun, a subtle shift passed through the air, like the breath of a hidden wind. By the next morning, the first testimony arrived. An elderly widow came running to the churchyard, shouting that her debt at the local store had been cancelled without explanation. The trader, known for his stubbornness, had woken that day and claimed he felt led to forgive her balance. Another woman came days later, weeping with joy. Her son, who had been bedridden for months, had stood up that morning, completely healed. Within a week, a young man returned to Aitoro after 5 years missing, claiming a strange dream had guided him home. The miracle spread like wildfire. Whispers turned into shouts, and shouts turned into crowds. By the 3rd Sunday, the small church that once struggled to fill 6 benches could not contain the people pressing through its doors. They stood by the windows, peered through cracks, even climbed trees to catch a glimpse of the preacher whose altar worked wonders. The Temple of Divine Mercy grew overnight into a name carried beyond the village. Gifts flowed in, bags of rice, envelopes of cash, even land. Local radio stations came to record his sermons. Invitations poured in from nearby towns. "Come to our crusade, Pastor Chukwudi. Lay your hands upon our altar." For the first time in his life, Chukwudi felt seen, remembered, chosen. He and Ngozi moved into a new house built with clean white walls and iron doors. A small car stood in their yard, gleaming under the sun. Their children wore new clothes, their laughter louder now. The same villagers who once pitied them now spoke his name with pride. "Our pastor is a true man of God," they said. "The Lord has remembered Aitoro." But beneath the celebration, something else stirred. It began quietly. One of the widows, the very first to testify, fell ill suddenly and died in her sleep. The next week, a young trader who had given generously collapsed in his shop without warning. A few days later, a student who once danced at the front during worship was found lifeless on her way home from school. At first, no one connected these deaths to the miracles. Life and death were familiar companions in the village. But the whispers began, faint at first, then louder. People murmured about a curse, about an altar that took as much as it gave. Elder Colonel, one of the oldest members of the church, came to Chukwudi one evening. The wind was heavy with dust, and the sun bled red across the horizon. Colonel's face was drawn with worry as he spoke. "Pastor," he said, "I have seen many seasons in this land. Blessings that smell like blood are not blessings at all." Chukwudi forced a smile, though something cold passed through his stomach. "Elder, you worry too much. These are coincidences. God gives and takes." Colonel shook his head slowly. "God gives life, yes. But this," his voice trailed off. "Something else walks behind your pulpit." That night, Chukwudi sat alone in his study, staring at the bronze plate resting in its velvet cloth. It looked harmless, almost beautiful. Yet when he touched it, a low hum rose from it, deep and rhythmic, like the sound of a faraway drumbeat buried under the ground. He pulled his hand away quickly, but the sound lingered, vibrating in his bones. By the next Sunday, the plate seemed different. As he lifted it during offering, the air in the church grew heavy, and the candles near the altar flickered violently though no wind blew. When the first coin touched the metal, it glowed faintly, just for a heartbeat, then faded. The congregation gasped. After the service, people called it a sign of divine power. But that night, Ngozi lay awake beside her husband, unable to shake the unease creeping through her spirit. She began to notice strange things. The children, once playful and fearless, now refused to sleep alone. They whispered about voices that sing in the dark. The youngest woke one night screaming that someone was standing by the window, though no one was there. Ngozi prayed longer, harder, her voice trembling. She sprinkled the corners of the house with oil and read psalms before bed. But the nights grew heavier still. And each time Chukwudi brought the plate into the church, its hum grew louder, almost eager. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world slept, he would sometimes wake to find the plate uncovered, glowing softly on its own. He would stare at it for long minutes, heart pounding, torn between fear and fascination. And deep within, a voice, soft and persuasive, would whisper that this was the price of greatness. That every altar that rises must first be fed. The rains came late that year, and with them came whispers. The once praised temple of divine mercy, the pride of Aito, had begun to feel like a wound that refused to close. The miracles still came, yes, but they carried a shadow now. The dead no longer stayed silent. At first, it was quiet grief, one family burying a loved one, another lighting candles at dusk. But soon, the pattern became too sharp to ignore. Every testimony that drew cheers on Sunday seemed to bring mourning before the next. The widow who claimed healing died in her sleep. The trader whose shop doubled in size fell sick and wasted away in days. The girl who was said to have been touched by God was found lifeless in her bed, eyes open as if still watching something unseen. By the 4th month, people no longer ran to the altar. They came hesitantly, eyes darting to the bronze plate that gleamed under the church lights. Mothers whispered to their children not to touch it. Men crossed themselves before dropping their offerings. And outside the walls, in the market and at the stream, the name Pastor Chukwudi had changed its tone, from reverent to fearful. They said his miracles smelled like the grave. They said his prayers carried something that was not from God. Even the wind around the church seemed to have grown thicker, slower, reluctant to pass through the compound. Dogs refused to bark near the gate. At night, the lights flickered though the generator hummed steadily. Inside, Chukwudi felt the weight of it pressing against his skull. Sleep had become a stranger. He would sit in his chair until morning, staring at the plate on his desk. Sometimes, it looked like plain bronze, other times, it seemed to breathe, its symbols pulsing softly in the dim lamplight. The apparitions began soon after. During service, as the choir sang, he would look up and see faces in the crowd that did not belong to the living, the widow in her white head tie, smiling faintly among the ushers, the young trader seated in the front pew, his skin pale as chalk, the student girl standing near the altar, her eyes empty yet unblinking. Each time he blinked, they were gone. But the fear stayed. At night, he heard coins dropping on the floor when no one moved. The sound came from the direction of the altar, 1, 2, 3 clinks, soft, metallic, deliberate. He would rise, trembling, only to find nothing there. No coins, no shadow, just the smell of old metal in the air. Ngozi saw the change in her husband. His face had grown lean, his eyes sunken, his sermons shorter and less sure. He jumped at small sounds, muttered to himself during meals, and prayed with a desperation that frightened her. Then one night, she woke to find him kneeling in the sitting room, the bronze plate before him. A single candle burned beside it. His voice was low, hoarse, begging. Please, he whispered. Spare them. Take me instead. Not Ngozi, not the children. I have done what was asked. She froze by the doorway, the chill of dread crawling over her skin. The candle flame bent suddenly, as if pushed by an unseen breath. The shadows on the wall moved though the air was still. Chukwudi, she said softly, her voice trembling, who are you talking to? He turned slowly, his eyes hollow and wet. I didn't mean for it to be like this, he said. I only wanted help. I only wanted to be seen. Then the truth poured out of him, broken, heavy, unstoppable. He told her about Pastor Jethro, about the meeting in Lagos, the demonstration, the words, it receives and returns. He confessed that every miracle had been fed by a price, that each blessing demanded a soul. Ngozi sank to her knees, hands over her mouth. Her heart felt like it was tearing open. The word that had lifted them from hunger had been paid for in death. The altar she cleaned with reverence had become a gate of blood. She wept bitterly, clutching her chest. Lord, she cried, deliver us from this thing. Whatever it is, take it away from my house. Take it away from my children. The candle flickered violently, and for a moment, the plate seemed to pause in answer, a faint red glow sliding across its surface like breath. Later that night, the phone rang. The line crackled as if filled with distant static. It was Pastor Jethro. His voice was calm but cold, stripped of the charm it once carried. You should not have spoken against the plate, he said. It chooses its own price. You can't stop it now. The line went dead. And then the wind began. It howled around the house though no storm brewed outside. The curtains flapped violently. The walls groaned. Shadows spilled across the floor, thick and moving like liquid smoke. Ngozi grabbed her children, holding them close, whispering prayers through her tears. Chukwudi stood frozen in the center of the room, his mind splintering between faith and madness. He saw shapes forming in the dark, faces, hands, the outlines of those who had died. They smiled at him with hollow eyes. The house seemed to breathe. Somewhere in the darkness, the faint sound of coins dropping echoed again. Clink. 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 And in that moment, Pastor Chukwudi realized that the altar he had built no longer served him. It was feeding now, hungry, alive, and remembering every soul it had taken. The dawn of that Sunday rose heavy and strange, as if the sky itself hesitated before lifting its light over Aitoro. The air hung thick, unmoving. The birds did not sing. Even the goats that wandered near the church fence seemed restless, their bleating uneasy, their hoofs scuffing the dry earth. Inside the Temple of Divine Mercy, the crowd was the largest it had ever been. People came from villages beyond the hills, men in fine clothes, women in bright head ties, traders, teachers, even politicians. Word had spread that Pastor Chukwudi's ministry had birthed impossible miracles. Some came to receive, others came to see what kind of power brewed in Aitoro. The choir sang with a fierce joy, their voices echoing through the rafters. Drums pounded. People swayed, clapping and shouting hallelujah. The bronze plate gleamed on the altar, bathed in the morning sun, innocent in appearance, silent but watching. Chukwudi stepped forward to preach, his robe glinting white under the lights. But his face was pale, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. He gripped the pulpit with trembling hands. Ngozi sat in the front pew, her heart tight with dread. Today, he began, his voice low and uneven, we must speak of truth. The crowd quieted, waiting. He tried to continue, but something flickered in the corner of his vision. He froze. The widow stood by the aisle, smiling faintly. Behind her, the young trader raised his hand in silent greeting. And behind them, the student girl, her white dress floating as if moved by an unseen wind. They were there, rows of them, filling the benches that had once been empty, their pale faces mingling with the living. No one else seemed to notice. Only Chukwudi could see the crowd of the dead worshipping among the living. His breath caught in his throat. His sermon note slipped from his fingers. He stepped back, shaking his head, whispering, "No. No more." The congregation murmured. "Pastor," one of the elders asked. Chukwudi's voice rose suddenly, breaking into a shout. "It's the plate. Don't give. Don't touch it." The words cracked through the sanctuary like thunder. For a moment, the crowd stood frozen in confusion, then panic erupted. Women screamed. Men stumbled over benches, clutching their children. The ushers tried to restore order, but the fear spread like fire. Someone shouted that the pastor was possessed, another claimed to see shadows moving behind the altar. The choir stopped singing. Chukwudi's hands trembled as he turned toward the plate. It was humming now, softly at first, then louder, the sound vibrating through the floor. The air around it shimmered as though heated by invisible flames. He stepped closer, tears streaming down his face. "You've taken enough," he whispered. "Leave them alone. Leave my people." Then the lights flared. He screamed as the glow engulfed him, his body convulsing. The congregation fled through the doors, trampling over one another to escape. By the time Ngozi reached the altar, he had collapsed, motionless, the bronze plate pulsing faintly beside him. That night, Aitoro was silent. No dogs barked. No lamps burned. The wind moved strangely, circling the Naji home like something searching for its name. Inside, Ngozi sat on the floor, holding her husband's Bible close to her chest. The children slept fitfully beside her. She prayed until her throat burned. Then came the hum. It started softly, from the corner of the room. Her eyes widened. The bronze plate was there again. She had not brought it home, yet there it sat on the table, glowing a deep, angry red. Chukwudi was kneeling before it, his eyes hollow, his body trembling. "Take me," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Not them. Take me." The hum grew louder, almost deafening. The air seemed to thicken around him. Ngozi screamed, rushing forward, but something unseen pushed her back. She fell hard against the wall as shadows gathered around him, twisting, writhing, coiling like smoke. Chukwudi's cry was the last sound that filled the house. His hands clawed at his throat, his body jerking violently. His lips moved in a final prayer before his eyes rolled back. Then silence. When the glow faded, he lay lifeless on the floor, his head resting on Ngozi's lap. She rocked him gently, her tears falling on his face, whispering broken words of love and regret. By dawn, the bronze plate was gone. No one saw who carried it away or where it went. The once great temple of divine mercy was abandoned. The doors were chained, the windows shattered by wind. Weeds grew tall around the walls. But on some nights, those who walked near the old church swore they saw lights flickering inside, red, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat still pulsing beneath the altar. And sometimes, if you stood very still, you could hear the faint sound of coins dropping. Clink. 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 The villagers began to whisper again, passing the tale from mouth to mouth, lowering their voices when the moon rose. They said the pastor had been a good man who wanted too much too soon. They said the plate was still out there, searching for another desperate soul to feed its hunger. And at the end of every retelling, they would murmur the same warning. When faith turns to hunger, even holy things can become altars of death. True miracles never demand blood. Thank you for watching and listening to our story. In the comment section, please let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on our story. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more stories. See you in the next video. Bye.